Welcome, everybody, to the Serve Campus Podcast, a resource for campus ministry workers across Canada, providing inspiration, education, and coaching for people leading ministries on post-secondary campuses. Mark 10:45 says that the Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve and give his life as a ransom for many. The idea of serving isn't just a slogan with our network. It's actually what we do. And Serve Campus Network is a multifaceted approach to campus ministry with 5 models, including chaplaincy, campus churches, campus clubs, church-based, and creative models. And we endeavor to add value to post-secondary campus institutions, practically, emotionally, spiritually, with no strings attached. We aim to be helpful producers in a consumer-centric culture. Our question for those who are listening today is, how can we help serve you? We hope that our podcast will answer that question in some small way for you today. Well, today I'm excited to have Jordan Clark with us from the University of Regina.
Hello, everyone. It's good to be here today, John. And we've been talking about this podcast for a while, and we've been testing it out. So we've been getting some good feedback, and it's great to be a part of this with you.
Yeah, it's just been brewing in our hearts now for quite a while, and I'm really excited for this to be our first podcast. So, Jordan, thanks for being the guinea pig today.
You're very welcome.
Yeah, I'm excited to talk to you today, Jordan, because it wasn't too long ago that you started reaching out to University of Regina campus. And I think in some really wise and creative, fun ways. And how long have you been in Regina now? How long have you lived there?
Yeah, so my wife, I actually grew up in Vancouver area. So I grew up used to live in Abbotsford, and I grew up, went to high school in Ladner, British Columbia. And my dad got a job at Elam in Saskatoon after pastoring in Ladner for about 12 years. So they moved out there. I went to Summit for a year and a half. I failed most of my classes because I was lazy. And I eventually moved back out with my parents to Saskatoon. So I've been in Saskatchewan for just about 10 years now, or 11 years. And my wife and I have been in Regina for 5 years this year. So this is our 5th year being in Regina, which is unreal to think about. And we've been doing campus ministry since September 2019. So we've been in campus ministry for just about a year and a half now. And it's just been a wild experience. Being brand new to ministry, I'm a part-time children's pastor at Avonhurst Pentecostal Assembly in Regina, and our church is actually a part of our planting process where they are planting us on campus and trying to establish that ministry here, which is awesome. So I do university work and I do children's work. It's really different, but it's really cool to work with the next generation. So yeah.
Yeah, well, it's been quite a season for all of us in the pandemic, and you had about 4 months, probably 5-6 months of pre-pandemic launch on your campus. And tell us a little bit about that. Let me ask you this. What was the climate, the spiritual climate at the U of R when you started?
Yeah, so I would just say our history in Saskatchewan is we're a very conservative province. We're very blue. And so it's very different than a lot of provinces in Canada in that way. And so, our outreach methods from churches on campus have been pretty primitive or premature, I guess you could say, in the sense of the spiritual climate on campus. There's been awesome groups here before us, and they still are here. There's InterVarsity here. There was Power to Change here back in the day, from my understanding. But the reach on campus from churches has been pretty much non-existent except for to the extent of going on campus and, doing some protesting when it comes to abortion, when it comes to conservative political matters and stuff like that. And that has created a bit of a tension between the campus and just churches in general. So that was the climate and it still kind of is the climate. I think it's the climate on a lot of our campuses where we have to be strategic and we have to show Jesus's love to people through that kind of pre-made church lens that a lot of people have. And by the way, a lot of that is earned by the church. A lot of that it's not just, the church has made some mistakes in the past, and we know that, and we have to own up to those mistakes, and we have to look at moving forward and looking at how to build relationships even with those stigmas attached. So yeah, there was tension on campus. We've seen some of that tension in doing our ministry from just being Christians and being transparent and open about that. But that has affected our strategy moving forward. And we've been very, very strategic and very intentional in how we bring a group like us onto campus, and how do we foster a group on campus in a healthy way.
Yeah, I'm really curious about how you started your ministry from scratch. But just before we get to that, just one more question. Can you share with us the journey, how the journey got going in your heart to reach out to students at the university?
Yeah, so I'm called to ministry. I was called when I was 17 years old. It was at a kids camp that we were ministering to in Terrace, BC, at Lake Ells Camp. And I remember it was such a spiritual night that night. It was probably the most spiritual night I've ever had, to be honest, when it comes to people being baptized in the Spirit and kids praying over kids. It was amazing. And I remember God very clearly said, you're going to do ministry one day, and it's going to be with the next generation and just with the church body in Canada. So I knew I was called to Canada ministry. I just didn't know what it looked like. And I had a long journey leading into ministry in the first place. But when I finally finished my degree and moved here, because I failed miserably at Summit, it wasn't Summit's fault, it was my fault. And then I retook my degree at Horizon in Saskatoon, and as a much more mature adult, and married for a couple of years. And I went into ministry. I took a kids pastor's job because my dad was a kids pastor growing up, and he was in this, my late father is Rob Clark, for those of you who don't know, and I'm name dropping him because most of you probably do know of him or heard of him. And he was a very prominent kids pastor in our district and in both BC and Saskatchewan district. And so I got a kids pastor job kind of because of him. Those are the jobs I was getting offered because people knew of him. And so I took the job here, not really knowing where I was going to go in ministry. And I remember my Pastor Brad at Avonhurst, he's a huge community pastor focused on a community. Our church had already adopted a community school in our area, and I had been doing work at the community school, building that relationship from scratch, building that strong relationship there, where we now go into that school and we preach, we do talks there, we do stuff for them, we do grocery hampers, we do all the stuff for them. And we started at a relationship level that was kind of similar to campus, where they didn't want us to say we're Christians. So I had experience with that, and it caught my heart quite a bit. And I've always been passionate about taking Jesus outside of the building. That's always been my passion. Thinking of new ways to bring Jesus to people in Canada, right? And because we need to do that. Not everyone's going to go to church on Sunday morning. So anyways, Brad was like, I think we need to start something on campus. And I think, would you be interested in that, Jordan? And I said, no, I wouldn't be interested in that at all. And I said no right away because I just had full-time status at the church. I just got a full-time salary. I knew we wanted to start having kids right away. And I was like, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to risk that. Long story short, that day God planted a seed in me, and we started reaching out to people like you, John, and starting to tap into the Serve network a little bit to see how we start, where we start. And I was a part of that because we wanted to bring someone in, we wanted to hire someone to fill that position, to be young adults pastor and campus worker, right? But through that process, God planted the seed, and I started praying about it before telling anyone. And I said, God, if this is where you want me to go, I'm really terrified, but I need confirmation. And I got that confirmation through my wife. I was about to leave for the Serve Campus Network retreat, where we wanted to do some research. So we wanted to come to the retreat. Rob Powell, who was a part of starting University of Christian Ministries in BC, and a part of that process and moving that forward. And he used to be the national Serve director, I believe, right, John? Like
That's
before,
right. Yep.
before you. So we got into contact with him, and he was been praying for us. And he was like, Jordan, you got to go to the Serve Campus Network retreat, because you're going to meet Andy Gurley, who is the Red Frogs coordinator from Australia. He's going to be there. And he's like, you just got to go. You got to go. You got to go. And we ended up going. And at that retreat, that's when I told Brad, I said, I think I'm called to do this. I think this is where I'm supposed to go. And I'm really terrified. And he's like, he told me that it was me telling him that was actually confirmation, because he had been praying about it for me, because he had been told by other people in our circles that, why doesn't Jordan do this role? Why doesn't Jordan do this role? And Brad wanted it to be from God, obviously, so he didn't tell me that. But in that moment, he told me that. And and this is where we are now, through the help of the Serve Network and people in the network that have planted us, that have trained me in Red Frogs, which has been awesome and amazing. So
let's talk about that. So starting a ministry from nothing, you were kind of like Moses. No, I won't go, but then you went.
I'm nowhere near that benevolent or anything. So I'm a terrible person.
I'm just kidding.
So.
I'm just kidding. Just kidding. But now, you've been doing this a year and a half. And you've started and mentioned about Red Frogs, and Red Frogs is the creative component in our C5 model. So tell us a little bit about what Red Frogs does and how that got received on campus.
Well, like God has been working in my heart too, and just it's. If we're going to bring Jesus to people, and if we're going to break the stigmas that people attach to Christians, which they do, we have to be honest about that. And it's for different reasons. Most of it is because of people that have ruined our reputation in different ways, whether it's publicly or whatever, right? We all know those issues. So, like our goal was, how do we bring Jesus on campus in a way that's not toxic, that isn't imposing, right? That isn't inflicting Jesus on anyone. And I went back to the scriptures, and I read the Gospels. I read Luke and Matthew specifically over and over again, and just seeing the ministry of hospitality, especially in Luke, that Jesus built at the very beginning of his ministry, where it's this message of hospitality and serving people in their homes and serving people in their towns, going to where they're at. I honestly believe, and I stand by this, the greatest way to spread the good news of Jesus and to show people who Jesus is by serving them. So we didn't want to go on campus and say, we want to start a student club, we want to do this. No, we went in with a vision saying, this is where we want to end up one day. We want to end up with a church community that isn't in a building, that is built from inside campus out, that is something that grows organically because of discipling students and people. But we want to start by creating a model that serves students and that gets students serving people in areas that need service. So we looked at our campus with the help. Again, I'm going to Tammy Jungans from Manitoba at University of Manitoba. She is the Red Frogs coordinator there. She's been doing it for a long time there. And I sat with her at her table at the Serve Campus Network on purpose on the last day, because I knew this was someone near me. This is someone that has been very instrumental in starting it where she was at. And I asked her, I said, we would love for you to come and train me. I need to learn from you. I need to, because I have no idea what I'm doing. And she trained me in Red Frogs, and she really believed in me. And she got us the meeting with the student union executive, which is awesome. We wouldn't have had that meeting without her. And we had a meeting with the student union and we said, we want to serve you guys. We want to offer Red Frogs. It was through her that we actually found a survey done by the students on our campus, done I think it was 2 years before this, or a year and a half. They rated themselves a D- for their safety on campus when it comes to parties, especially. So the students were saying that they were feeling they were unsafe on campus. So we actually saw a need when it came to harm reduction. We saw a need when it came to putting sober eyes that are going to look out for vulnerable people in those situations. We saw a huge need for that. And so we said, we're going to fill that need. We're not going to build any Bible studies. We're not going to preach. We're not going to do any of that. We're going to pray over this campus. We're going to pray over these students that we meet every day, and we're just going to start Red Frogs and start serving. So we actually didn't even start a student club at all. We just started doing Red Frogs with our own people, and we brought people on board that got super excited from us doing it, and it just really sparked this whole ministry. Was doing Red Frogs. We launched all of this within 2 months, which is nuts. So June, we came back from the retreat. In May. In June, I got trained by Tammy, and then we had to get our insurance. We had to present this to our church board. We had to do all this stuff because our church was going to be the one kind of hosting Red Frogs for the time being. And within 2 months, we had to do insurance and all the back end work. And then we had to advertise for volunteers. We had about a week and a half because our insurance was a bit late. So we had a week and a half to advertise for volunteers. And we ran Welcome Week. We ran 3 days in a row, 11 a.m. till 3 a.m. We did pancakes in the morning. We did beer gardens in the afternoon. We did the late night party from 9 p.m. to 3 a.m. For Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. We had 30 volunteers commit to do Red Frogs, 25 to 30, which was awesome. And people were excited to serve students. Like, we had people stay for another shift because we broke it up into 3 shifts. We had someone stay all day one day. I said, you need to go and take a break. Like, you need to go away for 2 hours and take a break, come back for a late party, because they loved serving their fellow students, right? And so, and there wasn't anything like that on campus, from the Christian perspective, doing something like that, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, and that's so awesome that you got that kind of reception from a campus that initially the spiritual climate there was a bit dark, as you mentioned before, but things opened up as you just simply did these acts of service, were open-handed and transparent, and that's crucial for sure. And moving from Red Frogs, then you began to form a student club called Enrich, and that's the beauty about this C5 model, is that we can do that. And so tell us a little bit about how that happened with the club.
Our goal is to get outside of Sunday morning church, to build a community that doesn't just have a preacher preaching, but that has people interacting with each other, that has a discipleship model where you can hear someone teach, and it doesn't have to be me. It can be a student. It can be someone that wants to grow in their teaching. We actually have someone right now that doesn't really feel like he belongs in any church in our city very much, and he wanted to get more involved. He's now on our board for Enrich UofR, and he's teaching with me, and I'm getting him to teach Bible study, which he never thought he would be doing, right? And we learned that from University of Christian Ministries. We saw that that's what they were doing, and we want to be a small group focused community. So COVID made us shift faster than we expected into Enrich, because I remember even showing Tammy like our logo for Enrich UofR, and the whole vision is to plant a garden, right? To plant the seeds, to take care of all the parts of the garden, to make sure the garden doesn't overtake itself. Gardening takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of watering. It takes a lot of sun, right? And so we want to make sure we are discipling students intentionally, and not just trying to create another church where 50 people meet and it's fun, right? We want to be intentional. We want to show people who Jesus is from our actions and from how we live our lives. And we want to give students the tools to be able to lead each other into Jesus' glory and into his word, right? And so COVID hit, we couldn't do Red Frogs anymore. I said we need to really just plant Enrich now. And even Tammy before was like, just do Red Frogs, stick to Red Frogs for now, build the relationship up, and when the time is right, lean into the other part. And I mean, the time was right when COVID hit. So it forced us all online. Our campus closed, and so now we've actually formed a board of directors for Enrich UofR. And we're actually going to plant a church that's going to invite students and non-students to be a part of. We're going to meet not on a Sunday morning. It's going to be a church that meets within the week, so that we're not pulling people from their church communities already. And we're not a normal church. We're going to do different kinds of worship. We're going to do different types of teaching. We're going to be very intentional with with teaching people how to interact with their Bible. And that's what Enrich UofR is. And we're going to enrich wherever we go. If you are a Jesus-centered person, you should be enriching wherever you go, whether it's your workplace, whether it's your campus, whether it's your church, by the way, whether, you need to be an active participant in the word. You're not just supposed to be a hearer of the word. You're supposed to be a doer of the word. It says that in James. So that is our goal. And it's so cool, John, because we have a board of directors, which is wild. We can't even really do the ministry fully yet, because when we got ratified as a student club, that's when COVID hit. So we didn't even know if we were ratified or not. Like, we lost all of our connections to campus. We lost our student union. Our student union turnover happened with leadership and executives turning over. And what's so cool is that we gained new relationships with that new leadership. Like, God has taken care of us through this last year. And we now meet once a month for Bible study. We meet every week, and we do different things every week online. But we do have a small core community that is growing slowly, but it's growing. And we can't even table. We can't even advertise. We're brand new. And people are getting excited about what we're doing in our city. So it's really cool to see. What we could have done was we could have just given up and said, no, we're not going to do this anymore, right? We can't do Red Frogs. There's no hope, whatever. But we pressed forward and we said, okay, where can we pivot and be flexible? And because we can't do the ministry 100% right now on the front line, we have taken that energy to put the back end work in to establish our identity, to establish what our ministry is, so that when we go full swing back into campus being open, we'll have an independent structure that we've built, right? That God has built through us. So that's really exciting.
Yeah, that is exciting. So you started with Red Frogs, serving the campus and students, which grew into the club, Enrich, which now you are looking at launching the church, the campus church.
And we already have the church. Like, that's what our group is right now. Like, that's how we're looking at it, right? When I say establishing the church, I mean, let's do a weekly gathering on a night that works for people. And I think our church is, I know our church is going to be small group focused, right? Mm-hmm. So our church might happen in 2 different homes, right? Mm-hmm. It might happen at the coffee shop. It might happen at someone's house. It might, we're not trying to
whatever.
Exactly. We're not trying to build just one gathering and that's it, right? We're just not there yet. It's like, we're going to start with one because of COVID and stuff, we don't have the leaders we had the leaders and we did core groups in the fall, but we got restricted again, right? We got stricter rules placed on us. So now we're just all online. And so it's just about, that's what I mean when building a church. Because I don't want to build another church. We have 69 churches in the city here. They all do this. I'm not trying to be negative. They do very similar things to different denominations, but they do. Everyone meets on Sunday morning. They're trying to do different things during the week and whatever. But we want to be a church that is very different than that. And we want to build up the local church. We want students to come into our church, and we already have a relationship with a Church of God church in our city that are giving to us every month. I'm one of their missionaries actually, which is crazy. So it's awesome.
Mhm.
And we have students that have come from their youth group now into our group, transitioning into university,
Yeah.
right? And we
Mhm.
want to be that network. We want to be that, hey, you don't have a local church yet, let's get you plugged into this church over here or to this church
Right.
that will suit your needs, right?
Yeah, it's not that you're trying to switch allegiances as much as
No.
you are adding to their lives another mentor and another connection for the next season that they have, right? And that's so much our vision and serve. Well, there's another question here I'd like to ask you. Can you think of a student story, kind of a neat student story that happened over the past 18 months that you'd like to share about?
Oh man. Yeah, this is a cool part of the ministry. Yeah, I have lots. I do have one that happened very recently, actually. And I want to highlight this one because it's such a positive, it's such a healthy story. And um, so there's a girl that was a part of our kids ministry, and she was one of my really strong kids leaders actually at Avonhurst. And what's cool is she was about 16, 17, and she wanted to get baptized. So I was the one that baptized her in water. And we've had a really strong, healthy pastoral relationship where I did mentor her quite a bit. And she went through a family crisis in her life where her dad, her parents recently split up, and it was really nasty, like a really, really awful split up. And where she's at now is she doesn't want anything to do with her dad, which is probably healthy, to be honest. And it's so cool because I took a bit of a break from reaching out to her because I didn't want to. I knew she just went to university recently. She just is going through this stuff. I didn't want to overwhelm her, but I've been praying for her. And I've God recently said, you need something happen. And she came back into my radar, and I reached out to her again. And going into that, I didn't know what the response was going to be. I thought it was going to be because she doesn't really want anything to do with Enrich. She loved Red Frogs. She kind of did Red Frogs with us at the very beginning for a bit. And I if you don't want to be a part of what we're doing, that's totally fine. I still want to be, if we have that relationship previously, I still feel an obligation and a call to help people that know me and I know, right? So I reached out to her again, and we went out for coffee. And it's so cool because you never know the impact you have on people. There was a scripture verse I prayed over her when she got baptized, and she has it tattooed on her now, which she just told me. And she's like, when you prayed that over me, I've never forgotten that. And this whole time of going through what I've been going through, and it was the salt of the earth and the light of the earth. It was that scripture in Matthew chapter 5 verse 13 to 16. And I God was, I told her, I said, you are just like, you want to work, you've always had a good work ethic, you are going to be the salt of the earth, and you need to preserve your saltiness. You need to make sure you're always spending time with God. And she said she looked down on, and she was always brought back to that verse during this hard time. And she always remembered that prayer that I prayed over her, just allowing herself to go back to God when she was going through a dark time. Right. And I like almost broke down crying. Like I actually started crying. I was like, because I went through a lot in my life in the last 2 years. I lost my dad. I believe some of that was spiritual attack too, because we just launched this ministry, and then my dad got really sick, and then he passed away unexpectedly. And God has been really challenging me the last 2 years of my life. It's been nuts. Like it's been really hard, and it's been really rewarding. And yeah, in that moment, I just realized like you never know the impact you have on people. And now she wants to get more involved. I'm mentoring her twice a month. We're reading a book together because she's questioning her faith, which I, by the way, think is a good thing. I think it's good when a 19-year-old is coming out of her parents' relationship and they're starting to look for God on their own, right? And I said, that's a great spot to be in. And she was surprised. She's like, what? I'm like, you need to find God for yourself. You need to find God on your own. You can't live a faith through me or through your church, right? So we're reading a book together. It's a really healthy mentorship where, my wife and I have kind of said, we want to be parent figures in your life if you want that, right? where you're not going to get that anymore all the time. So yeah, so that's a really cool thing that has come out of all this is if I wasn't in this university ministry, I probably would have missed her, to be honest. And that sounds awful, but it's so easy as a pastor just to get that tunnel vision and to lose track of people like that. And this starting Enrich has forced me to focus on people, because what we're doing is we're trying to reach people. We're not trying to build another system. We're trying to do a grassroots thing, just like Jesus did in Acts, or just like the disciples did in Acts, just like Jesus established in his ministry. And you can't do that without focusing on that individual person, right?
Right. Oh, that's a great story. Thanks for sharing that. And it's so good that this young lady can have that kind of good, healthy, spiritual parents, right?
Yeah.
And that's so much of really what we do on campuses is being spiritual parents, and disciplers. So that's awesome. Well, as we look to close our interview, I just have one last question to ask you, Jordan. And as you've described starting a ministry from scratch, what would you leave with our audience for the do's and don'ts? What would you encourage people to stay away from and point toward?
Well, the first thing I'll say is don't stop repenting before God. Don't stop. And that word repent sounds really mean, but it just means turning towards, right? Turning from and turning towards. It's not about you. It's about what God wants, right? I think we've seen recently too, just in ministry in general, we've seen a lot of things happen in the church, right? Where there's just lack of accountability. There's lack of transparency. There's things going on, and it causes people to get into this zone where it's all about them. And going through all this stuff recently, I've really have been very intentional with putting people in my life that disagree with me, right? That don't always see eye to eye with me, and that don't just say yes to me all the time. Because this isn't Jordan's ministry. This is, I really firmly believe that if we weren't the ones that were going to do this, it would be someone else. Like God, something was sitting there and God was waiting for that person to take that step of obedience, because our favor has been incredible. Our impact in the short amount of time has been nothing short of amazing. And it's been God, right? It's been God, and it's been God leading us. And the only reason we've gotten to this point is because I have made the ministry about God and about other people. So it's easy as a leader to take control, especially when people aren't getting back to you right away, or if things need to get done. You have to allow room for failure to happen. You have to allow room for things to get a little bit messy in that regard of, if you're going to give a task to a student leader, and they drop the ball, like, what does that process look like, right? Are you going to just ream them out and condemn them? Or are you going to walk alongside of them and say, what can I do better to serve you so that this can get done next time, right? That is what God has really humbled me in that regard, because I was pretty arrogant leading into this, to be honest. And God has really taught me to just be in consistent, constant repentance before him, and be in prayer, because we're not trying to build the Jordan show here. So yeah, so be flexible, hold yourself accountable, build systems of accountability around you as well, whether it's a board or whether it's mentors in your life, and allow that space for God to take you where you need to go. Don't be like, and that's the hard thing too, is you're going to have to be willing to make decisions blindly at times where you don't know what's going to happen. And God forces us to do that all the time, because we like to be in control, but he's going to force you to make a decision that you don't know what the outcome is going to be, but you have to make a decision. We have to be strong leaders in that regard of saying, there's a time to get feedback, but there's also time to move forward and make a decision, right? So be confident in God and confident. And that's why you need to be spending time with God. If you want to take a risk, start something new and pioneer something, you better be spending time with God. and spending time learning from other people that have already been where you've been before. And so yeah, that's where it all starts, is that heart of humility. And it's easier said than done, and we're still learning. Like we have a 10-year plan, but I don't know what this year looks like.
Yeah.
All I know is I have 4 board members. I have 3 leaders that are all meeting with me regularly that all care about this, right? Which is incredible. So it's just allowing those things to play out and letting God take control.
Well, thanks so much, Jordan, for sharing those things. I'm really looking forward to what God is doing there at the U of R. And again, so much has happened so quickly in the past year and a half. And, it's just God's timing, and with your availability and willingness and humility, the campus is being well served, and students are being touched for God's kingdom. So thank you again so much for being on the show. It's great to hear your heart. And if you're interested in connecting with Jordan, we'll have that in the show notes. And we'll be back next time with Seth Greenham, who's going to talk about how to multiply campus workers. And so until then, everybody, I hope today has really helped you think about how to better serve and enrich your ministry, whatever campus you're on. So have a great day.